How's it going, everybody? My name is Chase Teep and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be going over frugal living ideas on how to live cheaply, how you can cut down on the amount that you spend per month on rent. Rent and other housing expenses are almost always the single largest percentage of most people's monthly spending. And because of that, there is a massive opportunity. If you're able to cut down on the amount that you spend per month on rent, you could be saving yourself a lot of money over the course of the rest of your life. And almost everybody seems to think that there are only two options when it comes to housing. They think they either need a house or an apartment, and those are the only options that they have. But that couldn't be further from the truth. Today in this video, I have compiled 5 alternative ways of living that, yeah, they may be a little bit unconventional, but they can save you a lot of money and allow you to live frugally and cut down on the amount that you're spending per month on rent. So by the end of this video, I really want you guys to understand that there are more options out there. You don't have to only choose between a house and an apartment. So with that, let's jump into this video. There are 5 alternative ways of living to talk about today, and let's start with frugal living idea Number 1. Alright, frugal living idea is actually one that I have a lot of experience with myself, and this one's going to be co-living. So here's a little rundown of what co-living is. You're probably going to end up living in a normal sized apartment with 1 or 2 or sometimes maybe a few more bedrooms, but it's kind of just a normal size apartment. But here's the catch. You might be sharing that 1-bedroom apartment with 3 or even up to 7 other people. So you're sharing this normal sized apartment with a bunch of other people, and inside of that one shared bedroom there are going to be a bunch of pods. So there will be some pictures flashing across your screen right now of kind of what a pod looks like and what it's like living inside of one. It's basically a wooden box. Inside of it is your bed, and that's your private living space inside of this big shared apartment. And those pictures that you saw on the screen just now were actually pictures of my pod. That's right. I actually lived in a co-living apartment in Los Angeles for 9 months, and I recorded a video about my entire experience living there, the pros and cons of co-living. So if you do want to check that out, I'll just have a link to that video right up above. In the top right-hand corner of your screen, you can click on that little eye icon, and there will be a link to that video right now. So that video does have a full in-depth discussion about co-living and all of my experience from living there. And I will say this, not to spoil that video or anything, but I really did enjoy my entire time living there. I would have absolutely advised everybody else that I know to actually take a chance and go live in one of those apartments because they're really cool and they saved me a lot of money, and they can do the same for you. But obviously those apartments are cheaper for a reason. It's because you're living with so many other people. Honestly, there are sometimes 2-bedroom apartments where you're sharing the space with 9 people. So there's 10 people total inside of this 2-bedroom apartment. So that's the trade-off. You're spending a little less money, but you are living with a lot more people. But actually, another little pro about co-living, this is one that not a lot of people really think about, but you actually can get a shorter lease than you could with normal housing options. So usually when you buy into a house or you rent an apartment, you're kind of locked into a year-long lease or a 6-month lease or a 2-year lease. You know, you have to buy that lease for a certain amount of time. But actually, when I was in this co-living apartment, I was able to get a 3-month lease at the beginning, and from then on out, it was a 1-month minimum stay. So honestly, I could have left at almost any time, given them a month's notice, and left. And that provides a lot of financial freedom and flexibility. So if you're someone who's moving to a new city, really try to keep co-living in mind, because if you get there and you realize you don't like the city, or you don't like the neighborhood, or you just don't like co-living, you have the opportunity and the option to leave whenever you want. So again, that's something that can give you a lot of financial freedom. And if you're trying to save some money overall, this alternative way of living, co-living, can really be the best option for you. So that's co-living, and that was my frugal living idea number 1. Moving on to number 2, it's actually going to be living in an Airbnb. Now, I'm sure most people out there kind of have an idea of what Airbnb is, but basically, it's almost like renting a house for a few nights or something like that. If you're on vacation, you can stay in an Airbnb. You might be staying in an apartment complex or in a literal house with other people living in those other rooms, but you just basically buy those, and they're usually for short-term stays. It's almost like a substitute for staying at a hotel. But because of that, a lot of people usually think of Airbnb as a short-term living option only, when in reality you can actually stay at an Airbnb for an extended period of time. You can actually spend sometimes less than you would buying an apartment or a house, and it can be a really good option for a lot of people out there. In my experience, something that puts a lot of people off from staying at an Airbnb for an extended period of time is that they charge you per night, and a lot of people don't realize just how cheap it might be to be living in an Airbnb on a per night basis for maybe an entire month or 2 months or even a year. As a quick little example, if you did an Airbnb for maybe $20 a night over the course of a month or 30 days, you're going to be spending about $600. And when you think about $600 per month on rent in a lot of cities in the world, especially expensive places like LA or New York or San Francisco or something like that, that's actually a really good deal. And obviously $20 a night is just an example, and usually it's kind of on the lower end, but there are so many options when it comes to Airbnbs. There are usually so many properties in most cities in America and across the world, so just look into all of those options. And also another little pro with Airbnb is that these are fully furnished, move-in ready apartments basically. So if you're looking to move somewhere, but you want to save money on buying furniture and appliances and things for your own apartment or house, an Airbnb can be a really good option, because obviously you won't have to buy many things for the house because you basically move in with it ready to go. And actually another really cool thing that I've learned myself from looking into staying at Airbnbs for an extended period of time is that you can usually negotiate with the property manager for a lower rate than they're normally charging. Airbnb property managers are usually trying to get their place rented out as many nights as possible. So if you go to them and say, hey, I'm gonna live in this place for every single night and I will pay for every single night for the next 3 months, they might give you a slightly lower rate just to make sure that you're actually there, because overall they will make more money from you living there for that extended period of time than they would from otherwise having people move in for a week, leaving for a week, move in for a week. You know what I'm saying? So you can usually negotiate with these owners for a cut price. And this one is obviously very situational. You'll have to do your research and talk to a bunch of property managers to see if this is something that they want. A lot of managers don't really want people to stay for extended stays. Maybe they want to use that apartment themselves, or maybe they just don't want to have to deal with someone every single day of the year. But honestly, just look into this. Remember this as an option moving forward. You really can live in an Airbnb for about the same price that you would be paying for your own apartment or your own house, and it might really be worth it for you. And kind of like CoLiving was as an option, this could be really good for you if you're just moving to a new city for the first time. You know, you're really gonna have an opportunity to move in, get a layout of the city by living in this Airbnb, and then you can maybe move forward by staying in the Airbnb, or at that point maybe getting your own apartment or house. But it just gives you a lot of flexibility and could be a really good option for a lot of people out there. Moving on to the third frugal way of living for today's video. This one is going to be the most unconventional yet, the one that's probably the craziest that I've talked about so far, but you can actually live in a vehicle full time. You could live in an RV, in a camper, in a bus, in a van, or sometimes even a car, or maybe if there's water where you're living, you can actually live inside of a boat. And I know all of these options sound extremely strange and they are unconventional, but if you have a little bit of money to make that investment up front, they could save you a lot of money in the long term if you really do live in one of these vehicles. In recent years, we have really seen the rise of hashtag van life. We have seen it pop up all over YouTube and Instagram. So van life is obviously a very common thing. A lot of you out there have probably seen videos of people who live full-time inside of a Volkswagen van or inside of a school bus or just all kinds of crazy things like that. And here's one of the coolest things about living inside of a vehicle full-time. It gives you a ton of freedom. Not only can you choose where you want to live, because obviously you're living inside of a vehicle, so you can almost travel anywhere you want to. You can also choose how long you want to stay in one place. You can also choose where in that city you want to be living. And another really cool and positive thing about living in a vehicle is there's a lot of freedom when it comes to how much money you are willing to spend. Some of these vehicle conversions can cost tens of thousands of dollars, so they're not exactly cheap up front, but once you get over that initial investment, they will actually start being very cheap to live in full time for the rest of the time that you own that vehicle. And of course, you also have the option to just spend less money. Some conversions can only cost a couple $1,000s. You can literally live in just a normal van or a normal car or a normal boat for very cheap, and it'll be just something that is going to save you a lot of money in the long term. Instead of buying an apartment or a house, you're just spending this minimal amount on living inside of a vehicle. And obviously the trade-off with that, if you're spending less money in your conversion, you're not going to get as luxurious of a lifestyle, but that's still not really the point of this. The point here is to save money and live frugally, and this option of living inside of a vehicle can really bring you exactly that. And at this point in the video, I'm actually going to do something that I've never done on my channel before. In the description below is going to be a link to the podcast that I actually have with two of my best friends. And the reason that I'm plugging it right here in this video is because in a few months' time, we're going to be living full-time inside of a converted box truck. And if you want to follow along with that journey, go click on that link down below to our podcast so that you can hear everything about it as time goes on. There will be videos here on the channel in the future, but if you just want to follow that right away, again, go listen to that podcast. Again, I've never done this before on my channel. I've never plugged this podcast, but if you do want to listen to that, link is going to be down below. And that brings me to the fourth of 5 frugal living ideas that I wanted to talk about today. And admittedly, this is the option that I know the least about. I don't have any personal experience with it, but something that you can do if you want to save money in terms of living is move into a tiny home. I think tiny homes are really cool, and it's awesome to see these little tiny living spaces being extremely practical for a lot of people and also cost effective. These tiny homes can cost a significantly amount less than an apartment or a house, so they could really be worth it if you're someone who likes minimalism, likes not having a lot of things around you, likes not having a lot of space, but still wants to save as much money as possible. One of the coolest things about tiny homes that I found out in my research is that you can actually buy tiny homes that are already fully built, you can rent tiny homes from other people, or you could even build one yourself, which is a very cool option. I mean, you could basically take all of these supplies, build your own tiny home, and just live in that full time. It's an extremely cost-effective way of living. Now, of course, tiny homes are fairly situational. You can't really find them everywhere. It might be a struggle to find a place to build your own tiny home in the middle of a big city. And obviously they don't give you as much freedom as living in like a van because they're kind of just tied down to that one place, that one location. So that's admittedly going to be a little less freedom than living in a vehicle. But of course, the trade-off for that is that you're spending a lot less money than you probably would on an apartment or a house. And that could be a really good option for a lot of people out there, especially if you see some of these photos that I flashed throughout the video and you think that living in a tiny home is really, really cool. I definitely think that it's an option that I want to pursue in the future. One day, I would love to live in a tiny home. That sounds awesome. But if it's something that's worthwhile for you, I would just make sure you keep it in the back of your mind when you're looking at ways to live frugally. And before we get to my fifth and final alternative way of living frugally, I just want to say this. If you guys are enjoying the video, please, please, please turn that like button blue. Right below this video, there's a little gray like button. Make sure it's blue before you click off of the video. It really helps my channel out and it will help this video get pushed to more and more people. And if you are learning something new today, absolutely do that so that more and more people will be able to learn the exact same things. But with that out of the way, let's get into this fifth and final option. This one's actually going to be very different from all of the others, and I really just want to bring it up because, again, it's an option that not a lot of people think about, especially once they graduate from college or are starting their working life. But something that you can do if you want to save money and live frugally is live with your parents or other family members. Now, this option is almost always going to be the cheapest of all the options that I talked about before in this video because usually it's going to be pretty close to free, and that's obviously a massive plus for anybody that's trying to save money when it comes to rent. And if you do have parents or just other family members who live in the location that you either want to be living in or need to be living in, then this is just obviously such a great thing to look into because living somewhere for free or even just on a massively cut rate, that can save you so much money and really help you get started and get on your feet financially. A lot of people don't want to live with their parents because they feel like they're not succeeding in some way and they don't really like telling other people that they live with their parents. And the advice that I would tell everybody is this: Setting yourself up financially and being in a place where you can start saving some money while also living this lifestyle that you want to be living, you can't trade that for anything, and it's always going to be worth it. So looking to living with your parents, in my opinion, it's totally fine, and it shouldn't have that stigma. I think living with your parents is something that can bring so many positive benefits to a lot of people's lives that they shouldn't overlook it just because of that negative stigma that they might carry. And despite what other people may say or think about you living with your parents, definitely look into this as an option. Setting yourself up financially is, again, just such an important tactic and such an important thing that you can do in your life. And if the only way that you can really get that started today is living with your parents, do it. Look into this as an option. Remember it as a much better option than buying your own house, buying your own apartment, and putting yourself in debt when you could just be living with your parents and starting your financial life off on the right foot. That is definitely a discussion that I've wanted to have on my channel for a long time. I personally hate that negative stigma that comes with living with your parents. I think it's such a good option that everybody should honestly look into it. But with that just about wraps up this video. Those are my 5 frugal living ideas for cutting down on the amount of money that you spend per month on rent. If you guys have any experience with any of those 5 options, please comment down below. That would be so cool. Or if you know of other frugal living ideas that other people might be able to follow, again, comment that down below so that other people can see that advice and carry it with them for the rest of their lives. And once again, if you did enjoy this video or if you did learn something new today, please, please, please turn that like button blue before you go. It will help my channel out so much. And if you enjoyed the video, the best thing you can do is subscribe to the channel so that you never miss a single upload in the future. I post new videos every single Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and the best way to never miss a single one of those uploads is to subscribe. But with that, as always, I hope you guys are having an amazingly frugal day, and I will see you all again next time.